Hello and welcome back to the Work Inspired podcast. I'm your host, George Lucas Pfeiffer, and today's episode we have another incredible guest. AJ Patton has recently been named one of Crain's 40 Under 40 here in Chicago. He's the CEO of 548 Capital. And today we're going to be talking about how he started that company, the entrepreneurial story. We're going to be talking about sustainability and solar power and affordable housing, some really important topics. I know you're going to be inspired. Let's get started right now. AJ, thank you for being on Work Inspired. I appreciate your time and your insight. Excited to have this conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
So let's start off by hearing your story. I've done some reading on you, and I know it's not just unique, but an inspirational one.
Yeah, I mean, so the company I founded, 548 Enterprise, is a company around sustainable communities. Whether you want to invest, develop, workforce training, we've got all of that inside of the kind of the holding company. And so I started the company in 2016 around the concept that all communities should have access to sustainable technologies. And so we started with building solar powered affordable housing. We started with a 6-flat, and now we're up to tomorrow. We break ground on a $80 million industrial solar powered industrial development here in Chicago.
Wow.
That will have a 3.5 megawatt community solar system on the roof.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, I mean, we've grown a lot in 7 years. And so that's the concept, is just that all folks should have access to clean energy and sustainable technologies.
Take me back a little further, and it's relevant to the name of your company, I believe. But that was, I think, set the stage for where I want to dig in a little bit on the solar part as well.
Yeah. So the name of the company comes from in 1999, my mother received a $400 gas bill. She was making $10 an hour. And so unfortunately, our gas got shut off and we had to boil water to take a bath for almost a year. I was lucky. I was on the high school football and basketball team, so I could always get a good shower, hot shower at home, but on the weekend or in the locker room. But on the weekends, there was 4 pots on the stove. You carry it up and dump it in a porcelain tub, and you go back down and start a new set of pots on the stove. We had an electric stove, so yeah, we were, that was our reality. Now, fast forward, when it was time for me to consider leaving, being an executive at another firm and starting my own, everything I wanted to do needed to have meaning, and I wanted to be passionate about it, and I wanted to have purpose. And so I started 548. 548 is the unit number in the projects that I grew up in. And so I wanted everything to be around helping people. And if I can lower your utility bills and do right by the environment and create jobs and opportunities for others, then I think we've got something special.
That's awesome. I mean, when you tell that story, I know you're not an old guy. You're just recently named 40 Under 40 by Crain, so I know you're under 40.
That's true.
That sounds like a story that you'd hear someone's great grandpa say, But I think the reality is, and what some people don't realize, is that that's not uncommon even today, right? That there's a lot of people that don't have access to the right technologies, the right type of housing. And so that's part of what the mission is, right?
Amen. And so when I've gone from coast to coast, I mean, I've given speeches in lectures from Connecticut to San Francisco. And depending on what market I am in and who the group is, I either get the gasp of, this is a story from the 1800s. How could this ever be such? I've never heard such levels of poverty in our country. To, if I'm in Baltimore, the west side of Chicago, or certain parts of LA, the room may just nod and say, yeah, I boil water, take a bath too. That was almost a rite of passage.
Wow.
Because so much of these communities are disproportionately paying their income to pay a utility. They're living with inefficient housing. And so, when you have kind of energy inefficiency like that disproportionately impacts low income families. Certain incomes, you can stomach a high utility bill every once in a while. But if you're living check to check on tight margins, that extra $100-$200 can really undercut a family. Yeah.
How do you get, I mean, you went through it real fast, but how do you get from starting a company to now breaking ground on an $80 million project? What were some of the pillars of that success you've had so fast?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of this is positioning, and, there's always this intersection of being at the right place at the right time some luck, not giving up and just saying, I'm going to do this all the way until the very end. And if there's no end, I'm just going to keep going until we make this real. So there's like kind of 2 points. We started with the 6 flats, and then we went to a 30 unit mixed use building, which is, I mean, just such a massive jump, frankly. And then we started trying to find what was the next big thing. And then, interesting enough, the mayor rolled out her program for Invest Southwest. And she said, and so we were already building solar powered 6 flat, 30 units. We're almost done with the big guy. The mayor rolls out Invest Southwest, and she's like, we want a diverse coalition of developers leading quality architecture that's sustainable and good for the community. Well, I check all those boxes. I don't know the mayor from Adam. She could, I don't know her. And so we applied, and we've lost for the first Invest Southwest, but I got a call from someone on our staff that said, we have no clue who the heck you are, but whatever that thing you got going, keep doing that. That's special. And so we applied again, and for a couple of them, and we won them all.
Wow.
So we won 4 Invest Southwest, and then other developments happened simultaneously. So now we're building a 50 unit solar powered EV charging stations in the South Loop. And then all the Invest Southwest. And then we've got all these solar projects. So we went one day from having $2, $3, $4 million of developments to 300 million.
And how are you keeping up with that? Have you been just like, I mean, that's diving in to the deep end, right? Like, have you been learning a lot as you go, I'm sure?
Yeah, I think some of this is like, I joke in some crowds that I got a PhD in failure from the 6 flats. And so much happened with the 30 unit because it happened mid-COVID. So that deal kind of had a lot of headwinds. And I think there's so much lessons in failure that people can grab that you shouldn't be scared of. And so I think that's one piece. I think 2 is I am not afraid to say I don't know something. And I'm obsessed with surrounding myself with better people. And I think that coalitions matter. The moment my company had its breakthrough moment is when I stopped making it about me and my company and start making about the larger, greater we. And so, everyone gets the win. So tomorrow at the groundbreaking, we've invited all the civil engineers, mechanical, electrical, environmental, all the architects. This will be as much their breakthrough opportunity as it is mine. And I think I don't need to be the lead singer on every song.
Right.
I can play the bongo. Right. And I think that is an attractive quality where people then want to work with you and give you their best energy.
Agreed. I was intrigued when I was on your website, the coalition piece specifically. Is that something that you started? Was that the language kind of from the city? What is it and how does a company get involved?
Yeah, I try not to talk in the I's and more in the we's.
Sure.
But I am passionate about that. I will say that because I think what is my larger calling, which is just frankly to help people and help others accomplish their goals and to grow in their purpose. And so, I think it's powerful to list out, here's the folks I'm working with and having success with, and here's a link that you can click if you want to work with them too. I'm not holding these people hostage. I don't want them to only work with me. If people I really enjoy working with Kelsey Taylor at Engage Civil. I hope everyone works with that guy. He's awesome. Right. And the same with several others. Right. And so I think it's important to highlight the people that you've had success with. And so I just want to share the platform and good things happen from there.
It's cool. The other thing I noticed is that you've got, I think, a pretty powerful board of directors or an advisory board. That's how did that come together?
Yeah.
And if another entrepreneur organization is looking to kind of model off of some of your success, what advice would you have?
Yeah, we've got a great board. I will acknowledge some of that's happenstance. Some of that is just being willing to listen. I think, a lot of people, you can get a good mentor if you have even a modicum of something to offer, but simultaneously just listen and saying, hey, here, I've got a plan. Would you be willing to give me some counsel? And then if you show progress based on your previous plan and the counsel that they gave you, then they'll be more apt to give you part 2 of that conversation. Right.
Yep.
And so what I did was I would, every once in a while I'd score a cool meeting and I'd say, hey, you mind if I circle back 3 months from now or show you that I'm serious about this? And then eventually it was like, hey, dude, would you be on my advisory board? I would even say, frankly, some of the coolest people in my life and to give me the most heavy advice aren't even on my board. And I'm probably just as engaged with them, and they're big fish and they don't want public acknowledgement or something like that. But you just got to humble yourself and listen. And I've been trying to advocate to young people and all people. I think not just young people. I think too often we talk down to young people. I think in general, we got to be better listeners. There's something to be said about listening because there's so, Jim Clark's on my board. Jim Clark's one of the top bankers in the country. Pete Jean Greco, who's an Obama, he's an Obama guy. I mean, he's one of the original Obama builders, if you will. I don't talk when he's around. Every time we go to breakfast, I find a lot of shut up. I have a second helping of be quiet. And I just like, okay, yes, sir. Thank you. And then you get out of the way. Right. Yeah. And I just think that and then I take it and every piece of advice isn't applicable in every moment, but you can take something and grow on and expound on it and say, hey man, you gave me a little piece. And I took it all the way there. And eventually Pete's like, dude, I got to keep taking your calls because you're going to mess around and be something someday.
Yeah, I love that.
And so,
obviously you're showing that you're listening by your actions afterwards, your follow-up, your execution. You talked about, you're going to make it happen. There's no end until you get to the end, right?
Right.
But then also it sounds like you're a guy that doesn't take a whole lot of credit. You're willing to have gratitude and to give credit where credit's due. So I think those are two other pieces that probably aided in your ability to connect a network like this.
Yeah. And I think we're going to, I think there's going to be a market shift because in the attention economy, right, there's going to be a lot of people who are going to rush to the camera, rush to the microphone and, I, me. And I think you're going to see a counter balance or a counter wave of just doers. One of the most successful women I know, multi-million-dollar, top executive, immigrant family. She's got 150 followers on social media. And I'm like, every time I'm around her, I'm like, you are like the great, 30-something million. I mean, in this era, think about that. In this moment, if I told you there was a woman with makes $1 million a year, is an executive, self-made, immigrant family, and she does that, you would assume she'd be, hashtag every hour, right? Yeah. And loading up your LinkedIn. And she might be the most successful person I know, and she's got like 150 followers, barely posts. She's too busy doing instead of talking about it.
That's a fresh perspective because a lot of what you hear is that that's the exact opposite of where we're at right now, right? Not enough doers, too many eyes.
It's laughable. Yeah. It's interesting that, and I think it's a misappropriation of energy. We've got people who are spectacular marketers and terrible operators. And it's like, you're misusing your calling. You should be a head of marketing for a great operation, a good company. Instead, you're kind of over marketing yourself. So I think the market's going to, I hope, maybe I'm manifesting it. I hope the market rebalances itself.
Tell me about your team. What's your team structure look like?
Yeah, we have kind of depending on the angle of the project, we've got a couple of folks who focus exclusively on the renewable energy. So we've got kind of the administrative operational piece, which is Jocelyn. Then we've got leadership with Rob Wallace, who's a national guru on clean energy, kind of the godfather in some ways. And then, I've got internal staff operations and financial management. We're hiring right now, kind of growing the team. We kind of had to stay tight and small and scrappy. Now we're going to grow this year and probably bring on 3 to 4 more new staffers.
Cool. Are you finding that as you look for people to join the team, they've got to fit a certain passion? It seems like you're a passionate guy, and a lot of what you talk about helping others. Is there a certain type of person that's right for it? Yeah, and
I think the catch is always when you're small and growing, and you're growing quickly, then there's this, fair or not, expectation that everybody has to wear 2 hats. So, I wear 7 hats, and that's part of being the founder, right? But even the staff, my operations guy does everything. He's doing project management and he's on site and he's got keys, but he's also handling inventory and procurement. My CFO is also doing back office stuff and other, he's doing everything. And so I think you really need, so as we've been looking at who to hire next, you need to be good at more than one thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the times have changed, frankly, where in the old days, my dad laughs at me because he's good at 20 things. I'm good at like 2, right? And I think those guys are different. We're in the age of specialists. I do one thing well, I can go 100 foot deep on one thing versus, a different era where they could go 6 feet deep in 25 things. And so what we're trying to solve for with 548 is, do you have at least 2 skills that you can bring? And we're finding those people.
Cool. So let's talk a little bit more about solar. I mean, the government has just announced, I think, a couple massive infrastructure spending plans around renewable, energy. I think specifically around solar. It seems like the next decade is going to be incredibly busy in that sector, at least. You're passionate about it. Is it the energy source of the future? Is like what are we talking? What is your perspective on solar power?
I think it's going to be one of many variables that's going to help us transition to into the clean economy. I think what we're going to see is our grid. The more we electrify the grid, and the more we incentivize clean energy on the top of commercial buildings specifically, and to power the grid specifically, those two items, I think you'll see that the PV solar space is going to explode. I think, frankly, the Inflation Reduction Act is a godsend, but I think they have almost at any point probably undervalued its impact. I think it's going to be billions of dollars more than they expected in terms of impact, and tens of thousands of more jobs than they expected. And so we'll probably talk later about our jobs program, but I mean, you're going to see anybody that wants to participate in the clean economy can get a good job. Doesn't matter if you got a college degree. Who cares about your background? If you're ready to work and make some good money, it's going to be opportunities for you. And I think what's going to happen is then, I think eventually this will get depoliticized, because then we'll get away from the politics and have more of the economic conversation. Because I'm originally from Indiana, although I'm a Chicagoan now. Half my family's from Chicago, half my family's from Indiana. And I think that's when I'm in Indiana having these conversations, you have, they're not entirely as interested on the climate impact for now. Maybe that'll evolve, but they're interested in the economics. When I can lower your utility bill, I can get an audience. And so I think you're going to see ripples of impact of jobs being created, the economics of it, because my pitch to other developers, when I say, hey, give me your roof and I'll put solar on there and I can lower your utility bills and your master meter by 50%. That's the easiest sell you're making in your life. Right. And I don't care who you voted for. You ain't got to be a tree hugger or, blowing around in a Bugatti, right? It's like everybody will take cheap energy.
Sure.
And I think you follow the incentives and you'll see the impact. And so I think we're going to see some real change over the next few years.
And talking about economics and socioeconomics, is there a divide? Is a solar and alternative energy sources, is it more accessible to people with money, or are you seeing through government programs that it does make a lot of sense to make it available to everybody?
Yeah, and I think that's where the layers. It's a really good question. I think that's where you see the layers of federal incentives with state incentives, right? And I think that's where local municipalities get involved. So let's use Illinois as an example. The federal government's laid out its new IRA bill, which essentially puts the investment tax credit at up to 60% if you're putting clean energy on affordable housing. That means the government's going to rebate 60% of the cost of installation. Now, when you layer that with the state incentives for Illinois Solar for All from the CEJA plan, the Clean Energy Justice Act, or whatever they called it, it covers the other 40% of the gap. So now, if I call you tomorrow and you own a 10 unit in Ravenswood, I can put if you own a 10 unit in Inglewood, I can put solar on the roof of that free of charge to you. And the state statute says it's free of charge to you as long as I give you that energy at a minimum of 50% off. I can get the developer fee, some of the little bit of the cash flow, and now I just cut your bill in half. That's a massive win, right? And so that's where local municipalities layered with federal impact is massive. Now, what you'll see in other markets that don't, in other states, that don't have that the 40, 50, and 60% layer from the federal is enough. That's enough, frankly, because then you could take out a loan from the bank to cover the gap and pay it off of a timeline. Like that's a massive win. So I to your point about a luxury item to getting to the masses, like all things, it started as a luxury, but when you layer in the additional incentives and the intentionality inside of the IRA and with some of these state statutes, you're going to see a lot of people have access.
Is there a window that's closing, or how long do we have to act on this? Is this something that's just going to accelerate as far as the availability of these funds, or are the people that act now, are they going to have an advantage over those that don't?
Good question. I think as it's structured now, we've got a pretty open window.
Okay, good.
Now, as you and I know, political winds, can change.
Yes. There's no guarantee.
There's no guarantees anymore. Now, so that it almost begs a political question, right? To some degree. But as currently constructed and with the help of being in Illinois, we are in a good position for the foreseeable future.
And how about infrastructure? I mean, like you look at EVs, for example, there's this explosion in electric vehicles, but maybe not the infrastructure to put the charging stations. But some of this is the reason why they're doing it. But there's obviously these counter arguments coming out saying it's actually not real great for the environment to create the batteries or to maintain the charge. So is there a other side of this story? Sometimes, I mean, this sounds a little bit like, wow, is it too good to be true?
Right. I think what will happen is at all times, as you're going into a new market and you're building this platform out, there's going to be questions that have got to get answered as you scale. And I think one is that, let's use something as simple as the developments that we're doing around the city. We're doing stuff on 89th and Commercial and West Humboldt Park, 3800 block, and Roosevelt and Costner, that's pretty far west. 79th and Loomis, that's southwest. There isn't a single EV charging station in those communities. So when we build those charging stations there, when those developments get completed, they'll be the only in the neighborhood.
Wow.
Now, we already know that that's early. Those communities haven't adapted electric cars yet.
Yeah.
Because of where the market is as a luxury item, essentially. And those communities haven't been able to afford it. And they're not incentivized to take on to chase that because there's no infrastructure to support it anyway.
Yeah.
So I think what will happen is through this new IRA, there's so much incentive now to build that infrastructure. And also to incentivize the EV charging, car makers to build domestically because the incentives have changed. And I think as we've seen with all things, it's like smartphones. At one point there was one of them, now there's 10 of them. First we had Tesla, now everyone's is an adapter now, or an adopter now. And so I think what will happen is we just need to let the market mature, and then we'll find ourselves on the other end with a positive position.
Gotcha. We do a lot of work in commercial spaces. Our main business is to build out workspaces, and we're in multiple different verticals, but the majority historically has been corporate. And this big kind of conversation now around people returning to the workplace or staying at home. You've got a number of developers that are considering mixed use spaces, maybe taking some old tired office spaces and converting to some residential, like look at LaSalle Street, for example. Is there opportunity there to take what you're doing? You're talking a lot about residential and, roof and some of these incentives. Is there a way that a building owner might think about a mixed use space and tapping into some of this alternative energy?
Yeah, I don't think that, I think it would be short-sighted not to.
Yeah.
And maybe there's a bit self-interest there that I should acknowledge, but I because of one of the biggest problems with that adaptive reuse, let's use LaSalle Street as an example. I was heavy in some of those conversations about LaSalle Street. The biggest problem there is, one, in order to turn office into residential, is that those large floor plates is what the heck do you do at the center of those spaces? I mean, the two biggest questions about LaSalle Street is, in order to build a bedroom, you need to have a window. So everything's going to be built around the edges. So what happens to the middle of this new situation, right?
It's like a cruise ship.
It really is like a cruise ship, right? And so that's problem uno. Problem the number two is, the second biggest problem is you've got to change that entire HVAC system. That is a significant cost capital cost. And that's a big cost. So now you almost back yourself into needing cheap energy to power this building because now the use of just open space and a bunch of guys in a cube is very different than families living there, independently pounding on that electrical system. So you're going to really back into a need there that from what I hear, and I may be in the know, I think people are going to land on those decisions.
And to that extent, do you see more adoption on new space? Is it easier to put this kind of infrastructure in on a new development than it is to retrofit?
Absolutely. And the building code, this is once again, where municipalities lead, where governments can push the market. The building code's going to push us to all electric buildings. They're going to remove gas from the buildings. So we probably have to have part 2 of this conversation be about gas stoves probably. Sure. But, we're already building 3 buildings, all 4 of our largest developments are all electric.
Wow.
So there's no gas going to any of our 6 biggest buildings right now. Not a single gas line.
So that's the future, huh?
That is the future. And the building code is going to match it.
Wow.
It's going to push people that direction. And so we'll have to have part 2 of the conversation will be around electric stoves, induction stoves, and adaption and the pushback on the data of asthma causing it and all that good stuff, right? That's the next probably engagement and debate that we'll probably need to have as a community. But it's much easier to do that with a new construction.
Yep. As I was doing a little bit of research for this conversation, the stat on your website that was shocking the most to me was that there's over 250,000 people in, I think it was Chicago, that don't have access to affordable housing. Is that true?
That number has probably, you know what? That is directly from a white paper that was supported by the city. There's been some updates. That might be 2016 numbers.
Okay.
That might be 2016 numbers. But, the people who need affordable housing, the people that are unhoused, that are doubling up, it's real. And it's in all you have to know is before we've even opened up any of our developments, we have a waiting list for all of we're 90% of what I do is affordable. We have a waiting list. So every inspection within weeks, we've got my property, my leasing group's like, yeah, we've got this thing will be sold, gone. And it's something that folks don't think about, but it's the uniqueness of a major market, but affordable housing is a necessity. And we've seen where the cost of housing has increased so much and it has not wages have not matched it. And so, it's unfortunately it's become a political conversation when really it just should be a humanity conversation. We should just be talking about the basics of, we're building we're building 50 units in South Chicago off 89th and Commercial. And one of the it's an affordable development. And community leader raised her hand and she said, AJ, most of these are 60%, but just so you know, affordable in our neighborhood is 60% area median income, which I think it comes out to like rents around the 1800s, 1900. And she's like, well, the math says that if you make, $20 an hour and you've got a two person, 2 kids, you really need to be at 30% AMI. And she laid out the math and we had to come back and reposition our pro forma to make sure we had units that were affordable, some units that were affordable for people at 30% area median income. It is real. And, people that are really trying to make ends meet, particularly in the service industry, they need to be housed.
Right.
And we need to be thoughtful about that.
Are you hopeful about it? That's a big number. That's a big need, right? And I know you've got a goal of 5,000 units by 2030.
We had some big numbers out there. I think at one point we were talking about doing 2,000 units in a certain period of time. I think we've got the right leadership right now for it. I think you need big, bold ideas, big goals, and you need major institutional support. The support, the leadership we've got in the city of Chicago right now is spectacular when it comes to housing support. They're going to meet the moment. It takes time, and COVID just didn't help anybody, dude. It cost us 2 years of our life we just won't get back.
Amen.
And so it's going to be tough. We're playing a little bit of catch up there.
Mhm.
And then obviously COVID didn't just hurt us time wise. Coming out of it, it pretty much doubled all the construction costs.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mhm.
whatever your impact was previously, you almost can cut it in half if you're using the same budget.
Yeah.
So I think we're on the right path.
Cool. Well, what does the next 12 months look like? What's something you're looking forward to?
Looking forward to next 12 months. Two big things. We're going to pivot because we've got probably 7-8 real estate developments that are for better. They're on the, once you get these deals kind of going, they have a life of their own and they just go.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to pivot to two things. We're building out the solar company, and we are going to focus almost exclusively on building solar to power affordable housing built by local residents, returning citizens, veterans. And so so we started the company 540 Energy Solutions. We've got about 20 contracts now to put solar on affordable commercial buildings throughout the market of Chicago and the surrounding collar counties. And we've done zero marketing because I want to build the company and get processes correct.
Mm-hmm.
But we've just by, proximity, we've gotten a lot of contracts pretty early. And so the plan is to build that company and focus really on that while the real estate takes the next 2 years to get executed on. And so we're really going to be focusing on building solar on commercial buildings. So if it's a mixed use residential or industrial or retail, we want to put solar on it. And then simultaneously, we announced that we're building through the foundation of a nonprofit. Our philanthropic interest is not just affordable housing, but clean jobs. So on March 20th, we'll be starting our first cohort of 20 students, teaching them how to install solar. And so we're hiring specifically on the west side of Chicago. We're going to take 20 west side residents and we're going to teach them how to install solar, and we're guaranteeing everyone a job.
Wow.
And so those people will work on the contracts full time. They're going to work for 548. Now, what's happened is the word's gotten out. And so other solar developers have called me and said, hey, if I donate to your foundation, can I get first dibs on those graduates? And so you mentioned me being on 40 under 40 list this year. At the reception for 40 under 40, a developer showed up and cut a check for $600,000.
Wow.
And said, I want first dibs on your graduates.
Wow.
And so shout out to Summit Ridge.
Yeah. Wow.
And so they are seeding the foundation in some of its work on job training in the clean economy.
That's awesome. That's a great idea.
Yeah.
Well, you've given us a lot of great advice already. The future seems exciting for you in 548. A couple final questions.
Yep.
I ask these to all the guests, but what's a resource that's been valuable to you?
Okay. Resource. I'm a massive reader, podcaster. So I subscribe to probably 10 podcasts and listen to them all exhaustively. I probably subscribe to 7 publications. I read everything. I'm a nerd in that sense. So what resources would I advise? I mean, I'm sorry. Restructure the question.
So you obviously have a lot to choose from. Name one that's been especially valuable to you in your career, or as you've developed. What's something you could recommend to others, or is it just consume it as much as you can?
Yeah, I think we've done a couple things we've done right. One, I've got a really diverse set of friends, and I find myself just listening and trying to pay attention, and that's important. So the advice I give a lot of times: listen. We've seen too many. We know a great orator. There's a lot of great speakers. Who's the great listener? So I'm challenging everyone to do more listening. And I think that will then give you more direction. Simultaneously, is mix up your friend group. I've been really intentional about changing my friends every so often. So every couple of years, my friends I still got my friends from back home and from the yesteryears, and we still do stuff. But I've changed my friends entirely, and I'll do it again in 3 years and just add new people to the circle. And I think, people say, show me your friends, I'll show you your future. And that evolves, right? And so your friends should evolve. Your circle should evolve. And so that would definitely be some counsel I would share.
It's wonderful.
That was rapid fire. That wasn't very rapid.
I love it. It answered my last question too. It was going to be some words of advice, and you've given some great advice. So, hey, I can't thank you enough. This has been really insightful. I'm looking forward to following what you guys are doing. I've got some follow-up questions for off the podcast, but
there you go.
But yeah, congrats on your success, and thanks for taking the time to be here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this conversation, please take a moment to rate our show. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the Work Inspired podcast so that you don't miss any of the incredible guests we have planned for upcoming episodes. We'll continue to find the best and brightest minds in business so that you can learn, grow, and succeed, and so that we can all work inspired. Work Inspired is brought to you by BOS, a leader in commercial working environments and a Hayworth best-in-class dealership. Experience our 360 approach and discover the team, tools, and techniques required to navigate the complexity of your next workspace at BOS.com. If you have ideas, feedback, or would like to be featured on our show, please email podcast@BOS.com. Thank you for listening. This has been a Workspace digital production. If you're interested in launching a podcast at your organization, please email info@workspace.digital for a free consultation.